Welcome back, focused learner. Okay, so today we're diving into another explainer, and we're looking at ISO 14001-2026, specifically Clause 3.3. Now, I know what you're thinking. Support and operation terminology. It sounds like, a dry grammar lesson. But actually, scratch that. It is the absolute structural foundation of your entire environmental management system. We're not just reviewing vocabulary here, we are literally building a safety net. Mastering these specific operational terms is exactly what's going to save you from, quite frankly, catastrophic misinterpretations during a high-stakes environmental audit. So let's just get right into it. Here's what we're covering today. First, words that prevent audit failures. Then, why competence is not just training. After that, controlling your documented information, followed by why outsourcing doesn't outsource responsibility. And finally, avoiding terminology nonconformances. So think about this for a second. Can one single wrong word actually fail your environmental audit? I mean, it sounds kind of extreme, right? But imagine this scenario. You've got an external auditor reviewing your controls. They're digging into your system. And instead of seeing that crisp, standardized ISO 14001 terminology, they stumble across some outdated, ambiguous internal jargon. Let's say they ask a worker to demonstrate competence, but your documentation only requires them to be qualified. Boom. That one little terminology mix-up, that can absolutely lead to a major nonconformance. Precision in language isn't just about passing a vocabulary test. It's what prevents real-world operational disasters. Section 1. Words that prevent audit failures. The stakes of language. Okay, if you remember only one thing from today, make it this. Terminology precision is an active operational control mechanism. It's not just some linguistic preference. When your terminology is fuzzy or inconsistently understood, your organization is walking right into a massive misalignment. Ambiguous language creates these hidden compliance risks. Think about it. If your production team defines environmental performance completely differently than your compliance team does, your controls are just totally fragmented. But using precise terminology, you're actively deploying this protective shield right across your entire organization. And this brilliantly illustrates the problem. On one hand, you have an organization relying on ambiguous internal vocabulary. What they think they're saying is entirely different from what the auditor is actually reading. It's like playing a terrible game of telephone, leading to fragmented controls and zero accountability. Contrast that with ISO 14001-2026 standardized definitions, when literally everyone, from top management to the folks on the floor to your external auditors, speaks the exact same language. It guarantees unified governance. It totally neutralizes those audit misinterpretations. Moving right along to Section 2, competence is not just training, beyond the certificate. So ISO 14001 defines competence as the ability to apply knowledge and skills to achieve intended environmental outcomes. Notice what's missing there? It doesn't say attended a boring 3-hour seminar. It emphasizes the ability to apply. We're talking about behavioral capability here, situational awareness, real practical experience. Competence acts as an active preventive control to make absolutely sure an employee is genuinely ready to stop an environmental incident from happening in real time. This right here is exactly what an auditor is hunting for. If you're still throwing around the outdated phrase qualified personnel, you're focusing purely on someone holding a piece of paper or clicking through an online training module. But the precise ISO term, competent person, focuses on demonstrated capability. Honestly, an auditor knows a qualified worker might still freeze like a deer in headlights during an actual chemical spill. A competent person, though, they rely on proven, real-world operational capacity. Let's ground this with a real-world example. Say, handling hazardous chemicals. A truly competent worker doesn't just know that the chemicals are sitting there in a drum. They have to, step 1, understand chemical compatibility so they don't accidentally cause a dangerous reaction. Step 2, they need the ability to flawlessly execute spill response protocols when the pressure's on. And step 3, they actually have to know how to complete the required legal reporting afterward. True competence in these operational steps is exactly what prevents environmental contamination and hefty legal noncompliance. Okay, Section 3. Controlling your documented information, the organizational memory. The formal definition here is simply information required to be controlled and maintained by the environmental management system. ISO 14001-2026 very deliberately tossed out outdated words like records, forms, or manuals and replaced them with this much more precise term. It gives you flexibility in how you format things. Maybe it's a slick digital database, or maybe it's a physical logbook, but it demands strict, absolute control over its availability, its protection against tampering, and its accuracy. Think about it like this. If your staff is using the old term monitoring record, they're probably thinking, oh, I'm just filling out a form with some old data and tossing it into a filing cabinet to collect dust. But if you shift their mindset to the proper term, documented information, it changes the whole game. It signals to your team that they are actively maintaining a controlled, continuous piece of evidence for the system. It's all about guaranteeing that traceability. Now, what's really interesting about this is how it applies to highly technical areas like wastewater treatment. Look, an auditor isn't just going to take your word that the water's clean, right? No way. They want to see controlled documents that detail your sampling frequency, your specific treatment parameters, the calibration requirements for your tools, and your reporting procedures. Nailing these down as strictly controlled documented information guarantees consistent operational performance, and trust me, it satisfies even the toughest audit scrutiny. Moving to Section 4, outsourcing doesn't outsource responsibility, the extended boundary. Clause 3.3 defines outsourcing as the use of external organizations to perform processes or activities that may affect environmental performance. We're talking about your waste management contractors, your logistics partners, your facility maintenance crews. Making this definition crystal clear up front ensures that these external providers remain completely, perfectly aligned with your organization's own environmental objectives. I really want to emphasize this point because it's absolutely crucial. You can outsource the task, but you literally cannot outsource the legal and environmental accountability. Seriously, if your waste contractor decides to illegally dump hazardous materials somewhere, or your logistics provider completely ignores emissions regulations, guess what? That legal liability still falls squarely on your shoulders. The auditor is coming for you, not just them. Let's look at an example straight from the source: outsourced surface coating. If you hand off this process to an external manufacturer, you absolutely must bake specific environmental requirements right into their contracts and performance criteria. You've got to maintain control by tracking their chemical usage, enforcing their emission control measures, and monitoring their hazardous waste disposal. These are the operational controls that prove to an auditor that your outsourcing is actually legitimately compliant. Section 5, avoiding terminology nonconformances, the interconnected web. So let's move forward and see how all this builds together into a single foolproof safety net using an outsourced lab testing scenario. First off, you need internal competence to actually interpret the environmental lab results when they come back. Second, you have to maintain documented information that strictly defines your sampling methods and your reporting formats. And third, you must have outsourcing controls in place to guarantee that the external lab is meeting environmental quality standards. When these three exact terms are understood and implemented together, misinterpretation is pretty much impossible. It's like a giant puzzle coming together perfectly. It all really boils down to this. Clause 3.3 terminology functions as a stabilizing framework that harmonizes environmental communication across technical, managerial, and regulatory domains. By adopting these exact definitions, you're creating a shared, highly auditable reality. You're protecting your organization from regulatory misunderstandings, and you are making sure your entire team is pulling in the exact same direction. And that brings us to a provocative question I want to leave you with today. Does your documentation reflect actual, rigorous environmental controls, or is it just filled with outdated jargon? If your manuals still say qualified personnel instead of competent, or records instead of documented information, well, it's time for an update. I highly encourage you to go review your organization's environmental management system documentation today and tighten up that language. Thanks so much for joining me on this Explainer Focus Learner. Keep striving for precision, and I'll catch you in the next one.